Welcome back to Book Dragon Banter podcast. We're so glad you're here. I am Zinzi Bree. Joining me today, as usual, are Sage Moreaux and Katherine Suzette, my wonderful co-hosts. Today we are talking about our MMCs, our male main characters, heroes, anti-heroes, and the hero's journey. We're going to get into some of the common archetypes that we are reading most often in fantasy these days, and pretty heavily focus on Romantasy here a little bit in some of these breakdowns, but I'm excited to get into it with you guys.
This is an explicit podcast so that we can share our honest opinions with you. Okay.
This episode leans very heavily into pop culture stuff, a little bit more, I think, than some of our other ones.
And we do talk about spoilers, so you can check the show notes to see if there's a book that you don't want to hear, but otherwise, stick with us. The spoilers are worth it.
Okay, so I have, to start us off, favorite male main character. Ladies, who do you got? Who's your favorite? Do you have a favorite? Can you pick a favorite?
I have so many. It's really hard to narrow down. So, Aragorn is my top favorite from Lord of the Rings. From the moment that the hobbits walked into the prancing pony and saw Strider sitting in the back corner in the dark, I was like, who is this man? And I don't know if I want to be him or be with him or just like sword battle with him, train with weapons. I don't know. I can't decide. Aragorn.
Yep. I will admit my impression of Aragorn is very heavily influenced by, I saw the movies first. I did not read the books first. So Viggo Mortensen, who's perfect casting for Aragorn.
Yes. So good.
Yeah, he helps with making that the perfection that it is. However, he's not actually, if in the Lord of the Rings, he is not my favorite. My favorite would be Sam. Mm-hmm. As a male main character, and they have very different burdens to bear for their stories, and they don't do it perfectly, either of them, but they do. As a reader, you get to see them trying their hardest to succeed, and that's what makes them compelling and likable and interesting. Katherine, do you have a favorite male character to put forth?
I have so many as well. I love Jen from the Golem and the Jinni. I love both characters and boyfriend material. No, but none I've chosen to relay are your typical Romantasy MMC characters.
Like most Romantasies are not through the point of view of a man. So how are we defining male main character for this?
Okay, the same rules apply here as they did for the female main characters, which is not specifically a female protagonist, but a main character, that they're a character that has an arc in the story, that they get almost as much or very high amounts of page time as whoever your protagonist is, whether it's a fellow male or female. And it is also a male identifying character.
Okay.
So that's how we're defining our male main characters in this one. I'm surprised from you, Sage, for all your talk of The Cruel Prince, and like, how is Kaz Brecker or Cardin Greenbrier? How are they not your go-to? Aragorn is like, he's such on a different spectrum of moral goodness.
It's true. Well, like I said, I can't decide if like I want to be Aragorn. It's much less about being a romantic interest. Like, I also really love James Holden from The Expanse, and he has a similar kind of moral high ground. And I love that so much in characters. And so I know that, like, Cardin in The Cruel Prince is morally gray, and I do love the morally gray characters for the complexity that they bring and the depth of their character arcs. But when we're talking about male main characters where I just love everything that they embody, it is going to lead more into this altruistic nature that I think Aragorn has. James Holden also, I don't know if you guys read The Expanse or saw the TV show, but I super love him also. And he has this, he's very, and I think because it reminds me of myself. I'm very altruistic as a person, and I'm also often very idealistic and not necessarily realistic around some of that stuff. And I feel like that's the case for those characters too. when I was talking once to somebody about where I fell on the gender spectrum, and I was like, I'm female. Like, I identify fully as a woman, except for that bit of me that is Aragorn. So I was like, ever since I said that, I was like, wow, okay, I'm just going to hold that, because what a person to try to emulate in life is this very... I always loved the reluctant hero that recognizes how much of a weight doing the right thing is, but does it anyways. Like, I've always really loved that. Most of my other favorite male main characters from fantasy are also not the love interests. I like the male protagonists primarily. I do have some favorite love interest male characters. Carden is one of them.
Oh, well, that makes me want to like change mine then, because this also brings in a little bit, ties into the ways that females write male main characters as opposed to the way that men write male main characters. Like Nora Sakovich, I think she really represents the way that the masculine mind works, according to, as much as I can understand it, as a cisgendered, never even tried to think like a man person. But this book it's an Anne Rice, The Wolves of Midwinter. The male main character, he's also the protagonist, Reuben, I believe. The way that he thinks about the world, the way that he develops with all the changes around him and everything. He's almost a flat character, just like almost. And I think he thinks of things in a little bit more feminine way, the way that we've come to understand the representation of these minds. But I really enjoy the way that he encounters these moral problems and makes his decisions and things like that. Zinzi, what's yours?
I had to think about this, and I went to Goodreads and scanned through hundreds of books that I have read, and I have to admit, there's only a couple of books that I have read that have a male protagonist, main character male protagonist, that I've really rated highly and been like, this is amazing. So I would have to say my favorite male lead is probably Lyndon from Will White's The Cradle series. The first book is Unsold, and it is not lit RPG, it is progression fantasy. It is initially, at first, got very Asian flavors to it, but it is such a underdog to like all the way up to God tier, and it's just the structure of the power leveling and the growth that Lyndon goes through like on each of those stages is just, it's so fantastic. Like, just, it's so well written and spread out along the course of I think there's 10 or 12 books. The premise, even in the first book, Lyndon is unsouled. So everyone else has some ability to channel like chi or magic, and he can't. So he's treated very poorly because everyone else is better than him, literally. I love his struggle. I love his desire to do what's right. I love his sense of humor also is good. I will admit that the first 2 or 3 books in this series are a bit slower and have less of the humor than the later books do have. But I highly recommend the Cradle series by Will White.
I wonder what I would think if I went back and reread The Wolves of Midwinter now, because I read it like 5 years ago, and it just left an impact with me, like the sensations, the atmospheric appeal of it, the way that this character thought about things. But I wasn't an editor 5 years ago. I didn't think about books in the same way that I think about them now. And now I wonder if I went back and I applied all of the knowledge I have learned in the last few years to this, maybe not read it analytically, but absorb it with the filters that I have now and see what would change for me. How, I don't know.
All right. What about, is there a hated, I don't understand the hype? I have an answer for this, which is Edward from Twilight. And I respect girlies who, if you like him, he's for you. He's just not for me. Anyone who's got I watch you while you sleep, and then I leave in the morning and don't stick around, I'm going to take issue with. It would be different if I wasn't thinking of him in the context of a romantic lead. Like, as a romantic lead, he is not appealing to me. Versus Jacob, I probably would have been more, because he was much more concerned with what does Bella want and how do I give that to you, instead of, oh, you want, for Edward, it was, oh, you want me, but that puts you in danger too bad, we can't be together. Which I don't respect the decision that you can't work to find a solution together. I'm just going to make the decision for you. And my decision is your safety matters more than your choice. Bothers me.
Yeah, agree. Making me think of Vampire Diaries, which I've been rewatching a little bit of, and a similar thing, but that's not a book, so I will veer away from that.
No, the Vampire Diaries were originally books.
I read the first one and I didn't, but I think I read it after I'd started watching the show, so that's a little different. I don't think that I have a male main character that I really hate. Pretty like amenable in a lot of ways, and I'm good at seeing the good and even bad. I'll have to think about it more because I can't off the top of my head think of like side characters that I'm not fond of, but in terms of male lead, not so much.
My brain goes to like, there's so many, especially in YA, love triangles where maybe I have second lead syndrome, where just the second lead, because they usually tend to be the more nurturing, listen to the girl, sometimes self-sacrificing in a way that maybe they shouldn't have made that decision and then they would have gotten the girl kind of way. I think I like them better often than whatever male lead thinks he's making the right decisions that are for the female lead and then is just creating drama or creating the miscommunication trope.
I will say now that you mention that, because I'm wondering if you're thinking of Gale from the Hunger Games. And I didn't really like Gale very much. I didn't hate him per se, but every time I was annoyed with him and all the way through. And I am a huge PETA fan. A lot of the choices that Gale made, I didn't agree with.
Respect.
Yeah, but I don't really enjoy him.
Gale and PETA would be the exception for me, where I'm definitely Team PETA on that one. Full on Team Bread Boy. Catherine, do you have a hated or a disliked? Or if you're reading that, is that just a book that you're like, maybe I'll DNF this because I just don't care?
Yeah, I would say that that's more me. And the thing is, if I really don't like the characters, if they're irritating me enough to quit the book, I'm probably going to not remember it unless it's just so bad. And I don't want to just hate on one book, but the Twilight series is kind of famous for having people who adore it and people who can rail on it all day in not a good way. And yeah, I don't love really flat characters, generally speaking, even though I did just say I really like The Wolves of Midwinter, but like it's the way that his internal world is written. I think when a man just has nothing that I can respect in his choices, I'm not going to love that character. And I do think it's really popular, especially in the romantasy stuff, to have kind of some creepy tropes in there. The man who falls in love with the girl before she's of age and things like that. And so he respectfully waits until she's of age to go after her. But it disturbs me a lot. I think that's not the first book in the series, but there's a Hades Persephone retelling, episodic, yeah. So he waited centuries and centuries for the girl to come along, and then he knew she was the one. Like, he felt that connection pop into place and all that. Okay, fine. I have a little bit more, I can give him a little bit more leeway on that, okay? And he still respectfully waited until she grew up and all of that, but there's still something so creepy about men who watch the women sleep through the window, who fall in love before they're of age, like that. Or men who, in order to get the girl, manipulate her or the situation. I am not a fan. I don't like manipulation. I don't like miscommunication on purpose. I don't like gaslighting. I don't like I don't like non-supportive characters who are all about themselves. I love it when a man chooses to put his love interest first, at least in a situation that shows some kind of commitment. It doesn't have to be all the time, like, oh, I'm self-sacrificing all the time. No, I think it's far more important, though, to show that they can choose the other person and choose it with no expectation of return on that. It's simply because they love their love interest that they make this choice that's best for them. But speaking of making a choice that's best for them, when they remove themselves, like, oh, I think you'd be better off without me because I'm just such a horrible person. That, too, is like, why not let them decide what they want? Come on, people. Yeah. That's just another one of those, like, habitual tropes in male main characters. They're like, I just decided I wasn't good enough for you?
A lot more in Romantasy, I think, than in kind of standard fantasy with a romantic subplot. Is some of these heavier tropes, like because of the drama, right? You want to have like this relationship drama, so you bring in all of these various reasons that the characters can't be together, or why they might, if you, especially for a long series, right? You don't want them to get together at the end of book one and then that's it. What's the rest of your plot if it's a romantasy? So you need to constantly bring up things that are going to throw a wrench in the situation, and it's exhausting.
Well, now we're even seeing in Romantasy, and I'm thinking of, I think, Fourth Wing even, where the couple will get together physically, but what's being held off is the emotional intimacy, the eventual I love you. Like, that's what's being held off from the female main character not saying it to the male character. And I feel like that's more often now, where it's the woman is holding herself back than it is the guy. I think that we're seeing more in fantasy and romantasy where the guy is all in, crawl through the ground for her, where the girl then gets to be in the position of power. And carrying that throughout the series.
That's one of the, so there's definitely spoilers in what I'm going to say, but in the Court of Thorn and Roses, that's one of the things I really liked about Rysandus. He was like so about Feyre, who I did not love her very much, but I loved how, and there was the whole like mate thing, so that's always like a grain of salt for me, but he was like so in love with her, and I just do really like that when the male character is not playing hard to get or having commitment issues, because I think that's a kind of older trope, and I like that there's a change in that. Where there's, yeah, I'm super into you, but there's all this other drama that's causing us from being together. Or he did a lot of that same thing where it was like, oh, I don't know if I'm good enough for you. I don't want you to like choose me and then have to deal with my mess. And that's, I didn't love that part, but I also really like a wounded, this is whatever about me, but I do really like the wounded male love interest, where he's got such like baggage to go through. I think it's because it's a way of showing emotional arc for the man. And it's if he is processing through emotional hardship, or I think some women have the mothering instinct, want to help the wounded.
Sage, do you have the I can fix him?
No, I don't, not personally.
It's not the I can fix him?
I don't know. And I also like in a actual human relationship way, I don't want the wounded person, right? I'm happily married, but in like my life, I have never been like, oh, you're so damaged and wounded, let me bring you out. That's not at all. But in fiction,
sounds
that
exhausting.
seems to be, oh my God, so much work. And not with you can't change other people. You can support them in their own path to becoming the best version of themselves. Like
they gotta do the
magically
work.
whip it up. Yeah. But for some reason in fiction, I do like male characters who, and maybe it's just because I see that with a lot of female characters and I like it there to be equity.
And maybe that is another thing about the written from the female perspective. We want the emotions on the page. We want to see the male main character, especially in a love interest situation, choosing to grow. Whether or not it has anything to do with the other person is a little irrelevant. I want them for their own health. Just like when I was talking about my actual ideal male for myself, like I want them to be choosing themselves and taking care of themselves. And for me, that does mean some emotional growth in the character. And one of the books I mentioned earlier is by Nora Sakovich, The Foxhole Court. It's not a traditional fantasy, although it's all wrapped around a fantasy sport that the author invented. It's interesting. It's kind of like lacrosse and rugby, but these characters, every single one of them has a lot that they are going through, and it's revealed in such a way that you really do get that emotional connection between characters before you ever get anything physical. And I am so tired, honestly, of everything, like the physical part being what ties characters together. But he just knows all the buttons to push. He knows all my everything physically. But what about the emotional connection? I would rather have the physical part be the slow burn and have the emotions be unveiled to me and connecting everybody and bringing them together so that I know when they do jump into the sheets, there's profound connection. Now, I also don't care. There are a lot of female characters who I adore and male main characters that I adore that just don't value the emotional connection over the physical, especially in the beginning, because they just enjoy human physical connection. I'm trying to how explicit do we be here? But
This is
We're an explicit podcast.
oh yeah, that's right.
You can
Anyway.
say however you want.
Okay, good. I don't need everybody to think of sex in the same way that I do as more profound and important. They can go and have all their fun, but with a love interest, I personally, as a reader, want to see emotional connection, or I'm never going to value that relationship and remember it from a book. It's just not something that I care about. And again, that's another female perspective, male perspective, especially in the romantasy stuff that we see, that female gaze coming in. What do we want out of our books? And these days, there's something about it, like we want our porn on a page. Okay, fine, but I'm there to fall in love with the characters. I'm there to fall in love with their relationship. I'm there to fall in love with their stories. And so that's just, I'm coming to the books for a different reason than a lot of the modern romantasy seems to be going. That explicit for the purpose of feeling the physical responses is just not what gets me to be reading that book. It can get me to stay in a book in a way with Rysand and Feyre and things like that. Okay, their little moments are now classic in the romantasy genre, but I'm not reading for that. I'm reading for how he shows up for her, how he takes care of her, how he treats her in the books.
How he empowers her.
Yeah.
Yeah, he empowers.
And how they do it for each other. Important. That's definitely in ACOTAR. What's happening is Rysand's helping Feyre through all of her post-traumatic stress syndrome of becoming immortal. And she's also helping him through his 50 years of being basically a sex slave and other past trauma too. But they do help each other with their emotional issues. And I like that as an element. What Zinzi said earlier about how the physicality will come on the page a lot sooner than the emotional connection drives me crazy. Because I don't mind the slow burn. I don't mind the teasing, a little flirting, kissing, kind of stuff like that. But when there's like hardcore sex on the page, the porn on the page early on, and you're dangling, then I feel like it goes either way. You're either dangling the sex to eventually happen, like an assistant to the villain. I don't know if you guys have read all three of those books, but I think there's going to be a fourth one. The slow burn is so torturous to the point where you're like, okay, now I just feel like you're stringing me along. But early, I liked it because it was like, okay, they get to have a relationship outside of the sex that's developing. And yes, there's the flirting. Yes, there's the physical attraction. But we're not going to just jump into this being, which maybe isn't realistic necessarily, but I don't know. It's interesting.
I think that part of what bothers me by making sex the reason characters get together and stay together is especially those where they're not like an immortal being. They're not always going to be in their 20s in romantasy, and they will age eventually, and there's got to be some kind of emotional connection that keeps these people together and supporting each other through aging. For me, because of what I was telling you guys earlier with my genetic conditions and the chronic conditions that have come up because of that, they've got to show that they can support each other through sickness and in health. So that's a bit of a traditional marriage line here in America, but it means a lot to me to know that the characters can support each other even when they're not at their best, especially when they're not at their best, and especially when sex is not an option. For one reason or another, they've just got to a particular age and it isn't the thing for them anymore, or the physical health is getting in the way, or they're just too fucking tired. Things like that. I want to know what happens between the characters when sex is off the table. So again, love Foxhole Court. Go read it. There's not even any sex on the page. It is indicated in book 3, I think. And it's all LGBTQ rep, by the way. It's subtle and it's gorgeous. The characters, I adore them. I love them so much. I really want more books. Nora, if you're listening, please write more books.
Okay. I have a whole list here, guys. Having done research on different types of... Now, I will admit a lot of my interactions with a male main character are from the perspective of the heroine that he is pursuing. So I'm much more familiar with these kind of archetypes, the cinnamon roll, the golden retriever, the shadow daddy. alpha holes, which I recently learned about, alpha holes and alpha males, and that there's like betas and gammas, and I was like, what in the world? I do want to talk about the nice guy character. So I'll get into some definitions here. So the himbo is considered an attractive and fit, but lacking in intellectual depth male who is kind and respectful and well-intentioned. Examples of this, not in books, but from film, are George of the Jungle with Brendan Fraser and Kronk from The Emperor's New Groove. Like, Kronk is such a perfect example of a himbo, but George of the Jungle is an example of a himbo as a romantic lead. I love that movie. It's an example of what the feminine gaze in film and in the romantic comedy era is, a counterpoint to the masculine gaze. Because, like, in the majority of films, the masculine gaze is what you see. There's a zoom up on the woman's legs. There's a shot of here's her boobs before we see her face. The sexual appeal is often shown. If you look at, even in the Marvel movies, the early Iron Man and how Black Widow is introduced, Scarlett Johansson. Like, it's really interesting seeing the early movies where she's in tight dress, leopard print, high heels, and in her own movie, Black Widow, at the end of her tenure on Marvel, and she's in a hoodie and sweatshirts and in camel pants and short hair and isn't about satisfying the male gaze. It's not, her story isn't about that at that point. She's not needing to be introduced. You see her as a fully complex human being at that point because she's so well developed.
Yep.
Sorry, tangent with that. There's a cinnamon roll, which is a sweet and warm personality, emotionally available, good-hearted nature, possibly sometimes with a tough exterior. And there's specifically a contrast with alpha holes. Generally, like, those are your two ends of the spectrum of male archetypes, in my opinion. Golden Retriever is also here with the cinnamon roll. Golden Retriever is very similar to the cinnamon roll, but with a difference being their level of energy. They're very energetic and enthusiastic. So they have a little bit more good dog to them. I think a good example of this is Wendell from Emily Wilde's Encyclopedia of Fairies. I would consider him a golden retriever male lead. He just follows Emily to very cold places, even though he does not want to be in the cold, but it's where she is. So he's going to follow her and join her and force his way into also writing a book with her so he can just be near her, kind of a character. And then we have shadow daddies, which are our morally gray, dark and brooding, usually have shadow powers, which is part of where the shadow daddy name comes from. Also have protective devotion. It does seem like in general, most shadow daddies are older or immortal or, you know, some level of not the same age as the main character. And classic examples of this is Rysand, the Darkling, and Hades are all, and like, there's Shadow Daddy is super popular and pretty much all over Romantasy in particular. During my research into these different archetypes, on Reddit, there was a recommendation to listen to a podcast episode done by Fated Mates that was on alphas. Fated Mates is a romance book podcast primarily done by a romance writer and a romance editor. And they got into a conversation about how the appeal for alpha characters, for the Christian Greys, for the jerk billionaire, whatever alpha male story, and why he's such an appealing romantic interest has to do with patriarchy. And it's with, during the course of the story, the male representing patriarchy realizes his mistake, at some point grovels to the heroine, and comes back to her seeking equality.
That might be why I like some of the Shadow Daddy characters more, because I like to see the patriarchy torn down and the mistakes. Yes, that was wrong to you. Love that.
It blew my mind a little bit, and I was like, now I feel, and Shadow Daddy is not my preferred. I read cinnamon rolls and I read golden retrievers and stuff, but like, if I needed a justification for why I would enjoy that sort of story where here's hot, inaccessible guy, blah, 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 that's so stereotypical, getting his comeuppance in a way, in an emotional way, and learning to have emotion, like, yes, I want that. and I don't want it to just be a fantasy. I'm reading it in my fantasy books, but that's part of the story that I want to be real. I want them to learn and to grow and to have an arc and to seek equality and mutually lifting each other up and supporting each other. I came across that point and I thought it was amazing and wanted to share that. And I think it also applies specifically to the Shadow Daddy, because a lot of the Shadow Daddy characters kind of go through that cycle.
The things that I notice with them is, because I do find myself gravitating towards the Shadow Daddy characters as a romantic interest, not necessarily as the protagonist. But they do start in a position of power. And this whole thing of having like shadow power, usually it's like they are very strong in their magic, right? They are very powerful individuals.
And they're masculine.
And usually very masculine and often look very similar to each other with dark hair and crazy colored eyes or whatever. So there's...
Sorry, I really want to interrupt you for just a second.
Yeah.
I was on TikTok and there was a whole video that someone had done that was getting attention, that she was sending AI art of different characters, or maybe it wasn't AI art, maybe she found some fan art of Xaden and Rysand and the Darkling and different versions of Hades and all of these different guys. And she had to label them with their names because they all looked the same. They were all dark, brooding, magical, tattooed. And it was like, I don't know, I can't tell who any of them, they all look the same. Until you've got like maybe a Draco Malfoy character. It's like,
that looks different, but it's also a very
because he's blonde.
Because he's blonde, but it's not like he's golden blonde. He's like ice blonde, right?
Yeah.
And I think that has a similar element to the like black hair and violet or blue eye, super blue eyes, gray eyes, and that is similar to that like ice blue. There's like something about it that has an extreme level to the look.
They're all Byronic heroes.
Byronic. I need an explanation on that.
Yes.
Yeah,
I was just like, wait, what?
I don't know what that is either.
So a Byronic hero comes from Lord Byron poetry, like older, but the classic Byronic hero is Heathcliff from Wuthering Heights. And I feel like Shadow Daddies are the modern evolution of a Byronic hero.
Yeah.
Where you still have your traumatic past, very moody, or darker color palette as far as personal coloring and like their iconography. And even, Heathcliff is a Byronic hero. Jane Eyre, Mr. Rochester, also Byronic hero. The versions where Dracula is a love interest would put him on a Byronic hero kind of level. It's an old-fashioned word, maybe, for a Shadow Daddy, or the more smarty pants.
I'm learning I have such a type, and I didn't know it was a Byronic hero. Now I know.
Yeah,
what are you going to do?
Your type might be Byronic hero. Yeah, you can continue on you like Shadow Daddies.
So I think I do, but then I was reading this book that's pretty new. It's called Quicksilver. I
haven't heard it yet,
so
but aware of it.
It's pretty good, and I felt like it had a lot of potential. I'm looking forward to reading the second one because it felt a little all over the place. There's fae and there's vampires and there's alchemy, which was that part I enjoyed quite a lot. It falls in the category to me that I don't necessarily love of Romantasy, of it just feeling like you have to throw all the things in. Like you have to have the banter and you have to have the sex scenes and you have to have the moody male Byronic hero, Shadow Daddy, and you have to have the like confused human main female protagonist. And I read ACOTAR quite a long time ago and was pretty new at that point, I think. I don't even think all of them had come out when I started reading it. And I feel like now everything is just a little bit of a variation on a theme. His name is Kingfisher. And I actually, so then I was like, oh, but I like him. So I was like, yeah, okay. So yeah, I didn't love the main character as much as the woman, but I was like, oh, but I'm into this. Kingfisher is a weird name and I like that, and he's moody, and maybe he's a vampire. That's a spoiler, so sorry. I was like, that's what like pulled me through the story, where there was some inconsistencies in plot and like pacing, and there was like way too much of that early sex like Katherine was talking about. There was a lot of talk about erections and a lot of I'm so into you and I can smell that you're into me because I'm a fae, and like this kind of stuff, just I get annoyed by it.
I hate that.
Yeah, so, and
Gross.
there was a lot of that kind of stuff. But there was enough of a plot through line that I was interested in where it was going, especially once I like vampires. So once the vampire piece got introduced, I was like, oh, okay, it's not just your traditional Fae story. So I'll read the second one to see how it evolves from there. But yeah, same thing. It's again, a shadow daddy, a young human woman. She's in her 20s. I think now I've noticed with a lot of the Romantasy, the women are of age. So at least the ones that I've come across. So they are, there's not a question of whether or not you can have sex with them.
Oh, yeah.
We'll save that for the romance episode.
Yeah.
I'm not going to even start down that one.
Yeah. Stories where the characters are above, 30 years old are compelling these days, because a lot of us who really got into Romantasy and stuff like that, yeah, we love a lot of the YA and NA stuff, but then it's at age 30, a lot of this apparently dies in books. They're just not interested about writing a character with an active sex life above 30 years old or something. So that's one of the reasons why I love Midlife Madness and the whole series on that. I think it's the Leveling Up series. Just simply because the characters really own that they're in their midlife and they are choosing a whole new life for themselves, as often needs to happen in our world, because we make choices in our 20s that we get to change finally in our 40s. I like to be able to see characters who take hold and make changes in their lives. And that's for male main characters as much as female main characters and whatever gender they go by. But I like to see characters who take their life by the reins and make different choices and do it in a really good and compelling way. And in Midlife Madness, it's super sexually charged. There is a emotional development and emotional connection before there is physical connection in that one, and I appreciate that as well. And again, not everything has to be written to suit my personal preferences or anything like that, but I really like when there's emotional connection to tie characters together. Otherwise, what is going to keep that relationship going strong later in life?
Can I just interrupt you for a second?
Yeah.
Austin Steele, all the green flags.
All the green
All the green
flags.
flags, ladies.
Yes. And who needs a cinnamon roll when you can have a polar bear? We have total alpha energy, but he's a polar bear.
Maybe he's a polar bear who is a cinnamon roll.
Yeah. But the wolves, they're last century folks. Get on this pole. No.
Get a polar bear.
All for it.
Sage, you got to read it. All right. Now, so some other extra terms that I came across that I had listed: the alpha male, the alpha hole, which the alpha, Tamlin in book 1 doesn't come across, but as soon as you get to book 2, as soon as you get to a course of Court of Frost and Starlight, right? Is that the second one? Tamlin you recognize all of his alpha hole ways. Something else that comes out of romance tropes that I saw was the TSTL, which is too stupid to live.
Oh.
Which isn't for the men, but for the heroines, where they're constantly putting themselves in such dumb situations. It's amazing that they survive.
Right.
The other one that I enjoyed is the Duke of Slut.
Ooh. I don't know this.
Which is, so the Duke of Slut it's a male lead that goes around and sleeps around until he meets the one. So he's very well practiced in bed, enjoys being in bed, hasn't met a female that he has a problem sleeping with. The Duke of Slut would also be considered the rake, classically out of historical romance.
Yeah. Which is so classic in most historical romance. Almost every male lead was a rake. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And he's just for it because that's how it was back then.
I like a reformed rake.
I was trying to think,
Yeah, totally.
I just finished The Knight and the Moth, and something I appreciated about that is, even though the main character is a priestess, her virginity is not part of what makes her magical or a priestess. So she is allowed to sleep around, and some of the other sisters in her sisterhood take nights to just go roll in the grass, go roll in the green. And I was like, that felt refreshing, that the virginity wasn't required. It was interesting to be like, okay, here's some characters that there's a Duke and Duchess of Slut over here where they're experimenting and they've slept with other people, and that's fine, and we can move forward and do better together. And I appreciated that.
I really want to read Duke of Slut now. And The Knight and the Moth is on my holds list.
Duke of Slut is not a book title that I'm aware of.
Oh.
If that's out there.
Darn, I really wanted to read that.
It could be.
Yeah.
Somebody write that if it's not written already. The Duke of Slut. No, that's the Duke of Slut is that's just the rake. The archetype, not a book title.
You said something else. You said the too dumb to live or too stupid to live.
Too stupid to live.
Yeah,
Bella.
I noticed that like the damsel in distress thing is like super common, or at least it was with a lot of the FMC kind of things. But now I see it a lot in the LGBT stuff, especially with when it's a male protagonist and a male romantic interest. That one of them is just like really too stupid to live, and then the main guy is or vice versa. They're always having to be rescued by their love interest. Okay, so they're a golden retriever and they're too stupid to live. And like it's adorable. Well, there's something about it where you're like, I'm really concerned for this person in real life. Would this work? I don't know.
That's why it's fantasy.
Yeah,
That's fair.
I want to circle back to, because I promised in the female episode that I would come up with some female heroes that go on the hero's journey, which I had talked a little bit with Sage about this, and she brought up that Katniss goes on the hero's journey, and I fully agree with that, having done a little more research. The hero's journey, it feels kind of like a pillar of storytelling because it's seen so much. The Star Wars movies, particularly the very first one, is built on the hero's journey. Katniss in Hunger Games is hero's journey. The first Harry Potter book is hero's journey and heroine's journey. He's got both of those kind of layered in. It's really well done. I don't want to praise JKR for anything because of my feelings about her choices. But objectively looking at the writing and the popularity of the story, it is what it is. Another one that is a female that goes on the hero's journey is Mulan. So here's the structure. Mulan is living her normal, ordinary life. If you're following the Disney version, she's about to be match made to go off and be married. And then the call to adventure comes. And that is her father gets the order to go to war because he's the only male in the family. That then causes her to make a decision and to leave her ordinary world and go into New World, pretending to be a male, going into the army, taking her father's place, which she does. She almost fails out of, and I'm mostly taking this from the Disney version of Mulan because it's just a little easier at the moment to go through in my brain. She almost fails and washes out of the army as one of her challenges that she goes through, but then she's able to overcome that. And you've got Mushu. I don't know necessarily qualifies as the usual older mentor character because he's much more comic relief. But the equivalent is Gandalf for Frodo, Obi-Wan for Luke Skywalker. There's usually an older mentor figure in the hero's journey. And at some point, they almost always die or go missing or something happens to them. They get separated from the hero.
Could Shane mentor character?
He could technically count, even though he's also the romantic interest. I don't see an issue with that being dual things. But anyway, you go through further in the story and they get attacked by the Huns. She saves them, but in the process, she gets revealed as a woman and gets expelled from the army. That's kind of the dark night of the soul, where then she chooses, do I go home or do I do what's right? Even if it might cost, in the traditional Mulan, she gets beheaded after she's discovered. Like, that's the end of the story, and Disney's not about that. So that version then becomes she continues on to rescue the emperor from the Huns and has her life changed, is then celebrated. But at the end of the story, she still goes back home to her home and she's brought honor to her family home. And like, that's the structure of the hero's journey. And Katniss does the same, where at the end of her story, after in the first book, and even the whole trilogy, at the end, after she has succeeded at the games or succeeded in completing the revolution, she goes home. She goes back to District 13, right? Changed. And in her case, particularly melancholic. It's, changed and traumatized and sad, but trying to heal. So that's part of the hero's journey. So there's your two females who take a very clear hero's journey as Katniss and Mulan.
When we were talking about female main characters and we talked about how I don't know if there is a term, I'm sure there probably is. I guess it's like action girl, or there's maybe another term for that, but where women have, in a response to patriarchy, in a response to the feminist movement, we have all these main characters that are strong women who take on the characteristics of men, right? They are really good at battle, they're really tough, they swear a lot, and they have all these kind of swaggery kind of elements, right? I wanted to talk about what I'm noticing in our conversation here now we are talking a lot about romantic leads for the men, and it's almost like a feminist pivoting from the traditional male gaze of females, and we're putting a female gaze on men and categorizing them into these buckets. A lot of the tropes of these male characters are very two-dimensional. Now, that's not to say that authors don't often do a really good job of deepening those characters, even though the character might fall into a bucket of being a shadow daddy or being a cinnamon roll. But it's easy to
objectify
and to just say, you're this kind of character and you fit this role and you're not as much of a whole person. And so I just want to throw a shout out to a few books that I love that have a male main character where it's not a romance. And some of them are written by men and some are written by women. So I really, like I mentioned, Aragorn, he's not necessarily the main character. That one has a variety of main characters.
Yeah.
I'm a little older and I grew up reading a lot of fantasy novels where there weren't a lot of female main characters. So there were these men. And so I do recognize that I have a little bit of that. But one of my favorite characters of all times is Chivalry Farseer from the Farseer trilogy by Robin Hobb. That's all of her book. I think I've read all but like 2. And they're awesome. They're definitely, I think it's considered low fantasy because it's never about kings and queens, but it's definitely like what you traditionally think of as a high fantasy setting or a Game of Thrones, like super epic fantasy. But Chivalry is the bastard.
So epic fantasy, but not necessarily high fantasy, because low fantasy is often more the supernatural and contemporary, as far as my understanding of those categories go.
Okay. Yeah. So epic fantasy, but not high fantasy. I have heard her be put in the low fantasy bucket, but it's definitely like Chivalry they call him Fitz. He is the bastard of the king and gets adopted by the royal assassin and trained up to be an assassin. And there's magical elements, and he has this kind of magic that is very looked down upon, where he can commune with animals like you're not. And that's like this big shame that he holds because he has these strong bonds with these animals, and he gets it. They try to beat it out of him. Anyway, he's a great example of a very conflicted character who probably does go through a hero's journey. I think there's 9 books where he is the protagonist in it, but it's written through first person. And every time I read those books, I feel almost as I'm like I am him, or I relate so heavily. I think he's a very well-rounded character. The other one I'll save because it's part of my recommendation for this time. I do feel like there are a lot of well-rounded male characters, but they're often not in the position of being romantic lead. So if it's the female protagonist, I love it when the male character, the romance that she's into, is really well-rounded, as opposed to just being this like stereotypical, I'm going to write enemies to lovers with a shadow daddy.
Yeah. And
the characters are flatter. I really love it when the character is, even if they're the secondary character, the romance, because as women, we don't want the female. If it's a male protagonist, we don't want the female love interest to be flat. We want a well-rounded female character, right? So same thing with the men. I'm going to get off my high horse, but I just wanted to talk about that because I think it's nice to see. It's important. Yeah, and it's nice to see that it's not all male gaze all the time, which for so long it was. So now we have female gaze too.
So getting into the female gaze or the feminine gaze, because I don't think you have to be female to have a feminine gaze.
Thank you.
But it's interesting even seeing on social media the videos that'll be, this is what I look like when I dress for the male gaze, and it's low-cut tops and shorter skirts and emphasize the hips. This is what I wear for the female gaze, and it tends to be like, oh, there's now flowers on the shirt, and it's a big poofier skirt, and it's very, very feminine in a delicate and floral. I don't often see it being fierce. And I found that interesting in looking at some of those videos because to me, dressing for the female feminine gaze, it would run the spectrum from like this where I've got a little bit of puff sleeved on my blush pink shirt all the way over to, hey, I'm wearing like a leather corset and I look badass because I'm about to go cosplay as someone who's going into a fight. Those are, I feel like it can be all of those things or all along the spectrum of those things. I feel like it's very limiting for the feminine gaze to just be on things that are pastels and dainty and sweet.
Oh, I would go.
I feel like there's.
I like that, and I would say that the leather corset could go either direction. Is he appealing maybe to a feminine gaze and also masculine?
I'm thinking of also back to like male characters, like our thing with kilts, like men who wear kilts, the Highlander thing. Like, why do we have a thing with that? Yes, me too, Zinzi, me too. I don't know, there's something about a man who is so secure in his masculinity, he doesn't give a shit what he's wearing, he is still who he is. Like, a man that can put on a dress and go cosplay a female character because he just wants to, not because he has gender confusion or maybe he is a non-binary human, but a man who could just be a man in whatever he is wearing. Love it. And I feel the same way about women. I love the very non-binary, very starts with an A word look, the androgynous look. I love the androgynous look. I love the super feminine look. I love it all. But what gets me is the character who's truly being themselves regardless of whatever gaze they're embodying or dressing for. They're just confident and comfortable. They feel good in that moment on that day. That's what I really love. But I mean, also men in kilts. There's just something about the masculinity of specifically a Scottish man.
What you were saying goes with what I was talking about too, where it's like you want a whole character. You don't want just this man who's only attractive because he fits XYZ category. You want, like, he could be in all of these different guises and still very self-secure because he is more of a whole person, right? He's not just one archetype. I would like to see some non-Scottish characters in kilts because to me that would really, like, I mean, if it's like your whole family heritage thing, it takes a little less self-security to wear a kilt. But if you are not like Scottish in the Highlands and you wear a kilt, that says a lot about your ability to kind of.
Yeah. I want somebody, a male lead, who wears whatever the hell he wants to wear because it feels comfortable. Maybe he does wear the skirts because he loves the breeze and whatever. A man who is totally fully leaning into whomever he is on the inside, regardless of what he's wearing, and he wears whatever the fuck he wants to wear because that's just simply what he wants to wear.
I'm just going to shout out Harry Styles right now because I believe they
literally thinking the same thing. He did a whole article where he was like in ballet tights and dresses and just like, it's just fun. I like it.
He's got his boas. I don't know if you've seen that music video where he's part fish. Like, he does weird stuff and owns it.
Yeah.
So not a book character, but maybe he could I'm sure there's probably book characters based off of Harry.
This episode leans very heavily into pop culture stuff.
Yeah.
But so going to our book recs. I don't have a physical copy, but I'm going to do mine real quick. And I did mention it. So my book rec for an enjoyable male lead would be Emily Wilde's Encyclopedia of Fairies, written by, oh no, blank, my brain blanked. Nope, it's not going to come back. Although Olivia Atwater does Half a Soul, which also has a really interesting male romantic lead. Again, I'm sorry, Romantasy is where I hang out, guys.
I read that one.
It was corner of the Bic world. Yeah. I apparently just have a list of recommendations, all of which have male leads that are Mr. Darcy coded, because the other one that's coming to my mind is Lawrence from His Majesty's Dragon, which is by Naomi Novik. Highly recommend. I've only read the first book in that series. I'm really excited to read the rest of them. It is a slower pace because it follows more of a historical fantasy, but he's a character that I really enjoy his nobility and his desire to be responsible and to be honorable.
I have The Magicians here by Lev Grossman, and the main character's name is Quentin. It's talked about as being like a grown-up Harry Potter. There's swearing, there's drug and alcohol use, there's sex. It's about a magic school, and it's kind of like also got a Narnia theme going on. If you haven't read it, I really loved it. But I will say that people either love or hate Quentin. Everybody who's read it that I talked to has a very strong reaction to him. I find him to be an excellent male protagonist. He's flawed. He is annoying at times. He makes terrible choices, and it's a trilogy, one of my favorites. The other one I wanted to recommend is a very old high fantasy called Memory, Sorrow, and Thorn. The first book is called The Dragonbone Chair. I'm blanking on the author at the moment. The main character, Simon, it's a classic hero's journey. He starts as a young boy and he grows through all of these trials and hardships, and it's so lovely. There's a lot of other main characters too. It is a little bit more slow paced because it's traditional high fantasy, epic high fantasy, but the writing is beautiful. If you like very traditional fantasy, it's a really excellent story. Highly recommend.
What do you got for us, Catherine?
There are so many things I can always recommend. I always end up at this point and I'm like, I've already talked about the ones that I want to recommend. How about Carry On?
I love Baz.
Yeah. The way that he chooses to support
Simon.
Mm-hmm. The way that Baz chooses Simon and in such a loving and supportive and subtle way is good. I think in a lot of the female gaze romantasy, we have, he'll burn the world down for you and you must choose me and I'll do anything to make you choose me. I want you to be who you are. I want you to choose happiness. I want you to become the best version of you. And if that doesn't involve me, I'm going to support you in still choosing that version of you, no matter how much it hurts. And I think that's beautiful. It's sad, but it's beautiful. And of course, there's a happy ending. It's really good. Everybody, but I like the way that the characters encounter their inner struggles and make their choices after, and how they deal with consequences of the not so good decisions too.
And I think for the whole trilogy, it shows it doesn't just end at the end of the trilogy with them getting together at the very end. It shows how it is to be in relationship when it's difficult. And I really appreciate that, especially for a young, like it's a YA book. So for a younger audience that is reading this, it's a good example of what it means to be in a relationship. It's just not happily ever after, right? Which is what we get so often.
Yeah. The relationship doesn't end when you say yes, when you choose the person, when you say, I love you. That's not the end all be all. So many
books, so little time. You can find us on social media. We're over on TikTok and Insta and on YouTube. I'm the person who manages it, so you're mostly talking to me. If you want to get a hold of Sage or Catherine, their stuff is down in our show notes.
Our book club. We are about to read The Sword of Kaigen by L.M. Wang, and I am super excited for this one. I can't wait to chat about it with the ladies. So go pick up The Sword of Kaigen if you want to have read it before you've listened to our episode, but if you don't care about spoilers, you're welcome anytime.
Thank you so much for joining us on another episode of Book Dragon Banter. If you've enjoyed any of our episodes, we would love to hear from you. Let us know what books you're enjoying. If you have recommendations for future book club episodes for us, let us know in the comments.
And thank you so much for listening. See you guys next time.
Bye.